Okay, sweet. So, hi guys, my name is Delian. I'm part of this thing called Nightingale. So the problem that we're fundamentally trying to solve is compliance. So compliance is essentially when patients aren't taking their medication. So that means your doctor told you to take it 3 times a day and you're only taking it twice a day, or you're forgetting to take it entirely. And it costs the US about $300 billion a year. So it's a problem that I'm pretty excited about, and I kind of started looking into space and seeing what sort of solutions were out there, what was on the market. And a lot of what I noticed was, a lot of what I noticed was a bunch of tech solutions that, if you take a look at what they were actually doing, they essentially boiled down to an alarm clock. So whether it was going off on your phone, or if it was actually on a pill box or on a pill bottle, all it really did was go off at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And I noticed, oh, is this not on? Closer, there we go. Okay, sorry, it would only go off at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. It didn't necessarily work for patients. So I was like, okay, if that doesn't necessarily work, what is working for patients? And it's this thing that I like to call the grandfather principle. So the idea is the people that I noticed that were best at taking their medications were our grandfathers. Why? Not because they had an alarm clock on their phone, but instead because their grandmother was right there next to them, poking them at the exact right time. There's this idea of having a caregiver who essentially follows you around and knows your schedule. So we kind of try to take that idea and build it into a phone. So what we do is we essentially take sensor data from the phones, it's accelerometer, Wi-Fi, GPS, and we use that to learn to your specific schedule. So we know when you wake up, when you go to bed, when you get home, to do that, and then we ping you at the exact right time. So that's kind of what our product is. We started coding this in January. In May, we about last week, finished our beta prototype, and are now rolling it out at MGH, Beth Israel, and in a clinic down in San Diego, and are getting some valuable data off of that. And the goal is to have the patient side launched probably by August, and hopefully also a physician side that helps physicians also manage their compliance as well. So target market is essentially baby boomers. So these are people who are essentially getting on their first chronic diseases. So 45 to 65-year-old just had their first heart attack essentially. That's kind of who we're going after. So the team is me and 2 other MIT engineers. I recently got the Teal Fellowship to work on this full time for the next 2 years. So it's going to be fun. So I'm taking some time off of MIT. And so some of the tech challenges that are really fun about this is, so the app itself is actually HTML5. We have a native interface that takes care of a lot of the sensor collection. So that's the accelerometer, Wi-Fi, et cetera. So there's been some fun tech challenges around how to integrate the 2 of those. And then I think the really fun stuff we get to do is this artificial intelligence. So there's these 2 things in our AI called support vector machines and rules machines, which essentially, to kind of simplify what they are, is they're essentially helping a computer make decisions kind of like a human would. So what we do is we take a lot of the sensor data and we say okay, last Tuesday he woke up and went on a run, and then afterwards he took his medications. And so we're looking to see, okay, should we remind him before the run or after the run? And we look at previous data to essentially learn. So the idea is it gets better and better over time. And so this is essentially the app. So what it shows is it's essentially a dashboard for you. It shows you last week of compliance. So you can see when I took this, on Thursday, I missed my medications, and then it says, okay, we'll ping you around. It has learned that I take my evening medications around 10:37 p.m., but it'll kind of adjust based on what I'm doing that evening. So if I'm still out to dinner with friends, it'll wait until I actually get home. But that's kind of the product. Yeah. And any questions?
Well, there's tons of technology out there to make this 10 years.
Yeah.
And none of that is working because it's twice all this.
Yeah.
Why do you think your technology won't work?
So it's an interesting
Repeat the question. Repeat the question.
So there's a lot of adherence technologies that are out there right now. Why do you think yours is going to work? Essentially because it's a behavioral problem, right? It requires self-discipline. So what we've kind of realized is we think that a lot of the reason people aren't compliant is because there's a lot of these one-size-fits-all solutions of people trying to go after them. And in the end, the thing that causes, I think, compliance rates to go up is when people sort of feel this emotional connection to someone that's watching over them and actually cares if they take their meds. So your grandfather might not take his medications because he's embarrassed to take it because his kids will know that he's weak or something like that. But if his daughter goes up to him and he's like, hey dad, it would be awesome if you were alive for my graduation, he'll probably make sure to take his medications. So we kind of try and build in those sort of messaging and things like that into the app. So you'll get push notifications that are hey, time to take your medications. And if you forget to, we'll ping you again an hour later, hey, you should really take them, you're gonna feel sick. And 2 hours later, if you still haven't taken them, then we'll text your mom, and then your mom will call you up and be hey, you should really be taking your medication. So the idea is I think we've created something that's a little bit more personalized just for you and kind of actually tries to play your emotions a little bit. In the back of the image.
It seems like the app needs to be running constantly, especially on the iOS devices. Is that basically what you're telling users to do in the program all the time?
Yeah, so there's been some interesting, fun tech stuff. So I worked at Square this last summer, and if you guys know, they have this like consumer-facing app that will like check you in whenever you like walk by like nearby stores, and that doesn't necessarily have to be in the foreground. So a lot of those similar technologies are built into here, where it does a lot of the sensor collection data in the background. That way, you don't necessarily have to have it open. But there's a lot of our secret sauce on like how to keep battery really high, but like still maintaining a lot of like data on you.
If you, on iPhone, you can keep the patient alive only if you have service center. So how we do what they did for Apple.
Yeah, there are other ways of keeping your app on, I'll say that. It's a little bit like hacking, sometimes Apple gets angry, but they will approve it if you figure it out. But there are other ways of keeping your app going in the foreground. Or in the background, sorry. In the red, I think?
Yeah, I got actually a couple of questions,
Yeah.
if you don't mind
Yeah,
entertaining me.
go for it.
How is the company funded?
So the company is funded right now through, so I was at MIT, so we won a couple of competitions and took a couple of classes there. And then I also worked at Square this last summer, which gave me a decent amount of money. And then the Teal Fellowship also gives you $100,000 to work on it as well. So those are kind of like the three primary sources: is Square last summer, MIT, and Teal Fellowship.
Congratulations on those.
Thank you.
When you say you rolled it out at a few hospitals, how did you roll it out at the hospitals? I mean, it goes to end users, right?
Yeah. So the idea is the first product that we're kind of creating is this. So it's like the patient-facing thing. The next step is kind of building out a physician-facing application. So that helps them see all of their patients, see how they're compliant they are, see if they're actually like understanding why they're taking their prescriptions. So the reason we kind of rolled it out initially through hospitals was because the next step, it was like easy to have those partnerships already put in place. And I really wanted to get a variety of disease states. So, when I gave this out to my friends back in January in like our alpha release, it was a bunch of college girls that were on birth control, which is like useful, but like not as useful as I wanted it to be.
How did you find that process of rolling it out through the hospitals? How did you get them to adopt it? And then, if you have a business here, what's your business model?
Yeah, so it's a pain in the ass to roll out in a hospital. I'll say that. It's much easier to get into like private clinics and things like that, just because they aren't necessarily like following any regulations. So we actually have like our biggest trial is in San Diego with an ophthalmologist who runs his own private clinic. And it's fucking easy as hell to get it out with him, but actually like having somebody who's like an MDH, you have to like go through the loops. And then business model is eventually, so this will never be like, the 99-cent app on the App Store, because what's interesting about compliance is you as a patient aren't necessarily the one that's incentivized to take your medications, and you're not even necessarily the one that's benefiting the most by taking it. So we're always going to be trying to go after like the payer and the providers and having them pay for it. So providers is like your doctor that's in an ACO model, and essentially they're incentivized to increase their quality of care, or else they don't get reimbursed as much. And so you go to the physician and say like, hey, are you willing to pay $10 per patient per year to be able to monitor their compliance and be able to increase it?
You might even be able to take it to the next level and say, well, why don't you interface with the pharma companies that make the specific drugs the patient is taking, prescribed, so the doctor doesn't have to pay anything. The pharma companies would clearly underwrite it, especially if you gave them the ability to send specific products, specific messages to those patients based on their use case.
Yeah, so we're talking to Pfizer and Novartis. A lot of these companies want to see a little bit like more traction and see it a little bit with a lot more users. So we're kind of starting out with these small ACOs and then building our way up. There's still time for one more question. Okay, one more question.
Insurers, too, might be interested in this.
Yeah, so talking to Blue Cross Blue Shield and talking to Kaiser out in California as well. But again, both of them want scale. We're done. Sweet, thank you guys.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Join Boston New Technology Meetup. Sponsor an event or a venue. Present your idea and attend to network with Boston's brightest. Details are at www.bostonnewtech.org and in the video description.